What was your worst F this crap, I'm out moment? Some young woman and an old lady were arguing about stolen underwear in our communal laundry room. Young woman called for her cracked out boyfriend who came running in with a gun drawn screaming bloody murder. Noped right out, then moved out that weekend. Next story. Recently, I was hired by a company to be a foreman. My job was laid out in my interview as follows: plant maintenance and welding. I would run a crew of 4 guys and do odd jobs at a potato plant 10 miles from my house. This is what I've done for other various companies for the last 15 years. After taking the job, they asked me to help another foreman doing the same thing at a different potato plant about 80 miles away. I agreed as it was for a few days. Fast forward 3 weeks, I'm still driving 160 miles a day, and we've been doing concrete and asphalt prep for a week. Not my vocation. The boss casually mentioned at about 2 in the afternoon that we had to finish a particular part of the project before we left and that we would be there at least until 8 p.m. I told him I couldn't work late on short notice because I had plans and still had to drive home. He said, quote, "If you don't pick up the pace, you'll be leaving earlier than that." I told him I agreed since this wasn't the job I was hired for, that I was done. He replied with, "See ya," and I said, "Probably not." Next story. Just a few weeks ago, actually. It's a long story, so I'll try to boil it down to basics. My wife of the last 3 years has cheated on me repeatedly, used her depression as an excuse to abuse our children, manipulated everyone she knows, had repeated breakdowns, and refuses medication. About 6 weeks ago, she asked me to leave so we could, quote, get our crap together. I brought our 1.5-year-old baby with me, and after a few days to actually think about it, I decided I wasn't coming back and started the process of filing for custody. Edit for clarity, she has a child from a previous relationship that, although I'd love to, I have no legal grounds to file for custody of. We had 1 child together. I'm not picking favorites and leaving the other to the wolves. I simply don't have legal recourse to file for custody of her. I'm working on a solution to get her out of there, but that's going to take time. Yeah, that's what sucks about blended marriages and households is if you don't have any legal recourse for custody in the event of a split, that's just got to be heartbreaking. That's terrible. I feel for you, OP. You're doing the best you can, though. Great job. Next story. Me and my brother were chilling outside a 7-Eleven talking to a homeless guy, and he offered to take us into an alley and let us try some crack. Still not sure if he wanted to rob us, let us try his crack, or let us try his crack. LMAO. Next story. Not really so much a F this crap moment as confirmation of F this crap. Senior software engineer role at a leading telecom in the USA. One of 3 new devs to join the team. Manager decided it would be best to rotate support between the 3 newbies. Issues every night, sometimes all night. Huge pressure to work 60-plus hour weeks with totally unrealistic goals. After a few months, I realized this wasn't just a crunch period. This was going to be all the time. After giving notice, a manager set me down and told a story of how I'd have to decide what was important and take life seriously. His example was getting a call to come back to the office for an emergency and handing his 2-year-old daughter off to a neighbor he didn't know so he could come work all night. Yeah, F that. Then my last day, the VP pulls the team together and absolutely rips into this guy for taking 20 minutes to support an issue since he was driving home at the time and couldn't log in immediately when called. F that crap. Edit. I think it says something that so many people think it could have been their telecom. Decided to add that after giving notice, the director told me they wanted to make a counteroffer but needed to wait until the VP got back from a trip. A week later, the director comes to tell me the counter is that I should know the right thing to do is to stay and work through my issues. When I say no thanks, he then explodes that I'm not giving 2 weeks from that point. He started threatening me, trying to keep me 1 more week, but I already had a start date at another company. I immediately went to HR, who supported my 2-week notice. I've been with the same company since leaving there 14 years ago. I get to do challenging work with fun and intelligent people I consider friends, and I have plenty of time for my kids and hobbies. Next story. I was a shift lead at a fast food joint located inside of a gas station. Our manager was worthless at hiring people, so we were perpetually understaffed for months. I was working 50 to 60 hours a week. Absolutely ridiculous. However, company policy was that there had to be 2 people working at all times. This particular day, someone called out. Nobody would come in to cover the shift, so the manager was forced to stay and work a double. She decided that since the only reason she was there was because we would have to close otherwise, She was just going to hang out in the office and chat with the gas station employees. 3 hours into my shift, and I've been single-handedly running the front counter, the drive-thru, making all the food, doing prep and doing dishes. The dinner rush hit. I had like 4 cars in the drive-thru, 8 to 9 people inside, and then I ran out of onions because I couldn't get the prep done. My mind just quit. Brain turned off. Emotions went cold. I ripped off my headset, told the people inside that they weren't getting their food, walked into the office and tossed my name tag, manager card, and hat at my boss. When she turned around in shock, all I said was good luck and walked out the back. Next story. Some promoter literally gave me $80 to go into his Vegas strip club with my friends. Said he would, quote, throw in the limo and VIP package if we tipped the driver because his other reservation canceled. When we got there, we got different color wristbands than other people and were told we could only leave through their taxi when we left. That was our only option. One friend tried to leave and the bouncer wouldn't let him out. He came back and told us what was up. Nothing was adding up, so we booked it out of the fire exit and down the street. That was how I got paid $80 to go to a strip club. I'm pretty sure we were going to get robbed when we left and would probably have been drunk. Next story. I was unemployed and had a job interview for a cable installer position. The position advertised for $20 an hour, 40 plus hours a week, and benefits, so it seemed like a pretty good deal. I get to the interview and find out it's actually 2 interviews, a group interview followed by one-on-one interviews with the hiring manager. In the group interview, HM explains that the position was actually minimum wage and commission. He also explains that we need to supply our own tools. He then tells us how they assign jobs and we have no choice over which ones we get. Right before the end of the group interview, one of the other guys asks if there were any other expenses we were responsible for, and HM tells us that we had to pay for our own gas, tires, and repairs on our assigned company van. I look out in the parking lot and saw all the vans look like 20-year-old clapped-out pieces of crap. As soon as HM went back to his office, I left. Edit. I don't remember the name of the company, but they were a subcontractor installing Charter cable in Washington state. This was a few years ago, and I never really thought much about it until this question. I found a job I've been at since that wasn't some sort of scam as a data center technician. Yeah, this is kind of sleazy to advertise a job, and over-promote it is one thing, but for it to literally be the complete opposite of what you're saying it is absolutely shady business. Next story. I worked at a produce market when I was in college. I really needed the job. I really had empty cabinets and only one shelf of food in the fridge on a regular basis. I'd been working weekday evenings only for a couple of months, but picked up a Saturday shift. I was helping a customer and the owner walked up and interrupted our conversation. "Is that your yellow car in the parking lot?" And I go, "Yes." And she says with the most demeaning tone, "On weekends, our parking lot is reserved for customers only. If you value your job, you'll go punch out, move your car to the lot across the street, and never park in the lot again." I was astonished. I had full-time jobs every summer since I was 15. I picked up holiday jobs. I had a lot of working experience. I had never been talked to like this by any coworker or boss before, particularly in front of a customer. I told her I was not aware of the parking rules since I always worked weekdays, took off my apron, handed it to her, and said I will be punching out, but not punching back in. I quit. I told the customer I was sorry I was not able to finish helping him and walked out. I really needed the job, but was so pissed off I could not stand the idea of working there. My supervisor called me that afternoon and tried to get me to come back, but I just couldn't. Edit. I guess a lot of us have had crappy supervisors in similar moments. Makes us appreciate the good ones, I suppose. Many have asked how it all worked out afterwards. I got a job at the mall a few weeks later and eventually got a roommate that worked at a deli. I ate a lot of sandwiches. The following year, I changed schools and went back to work for the company I had worked at through high school and the first couple summers of college. My pay was nearly triple what I was making at the mall. Graduated debt-free, started my career. It's all good. Next story. I'm a middle school teacher, and it's also worth mentioning that I'm a very petite woman and most of my students are bigger than me. Many years ago, when I was considered one of the young and pretty teachers, I was walking down the hall. An 8th grade boy slapped me on the ass and mentioned my car's make and model, implying that he was going to wait for me in the parking lot. I immediately went to my principal, who told me that reporting the incident would reflect poorly on me, and I don't want a complaint like that in my file. I put in my resignation from that particular school the next day. The more I mention it, the more I realize that many teachers have similar experiences. Next story. Went with a friend to visit his dad and look for possible jobs in Chicago. While my friend was out job hunting the third day, his dad asked if I wanted to go to a bar with him. Sure. So we go to this hole-in-the-wall bar, legit down an alley and backdoor style, enter this dark, small room with a 6-foot bar. I'm already questioning whether I should have stayed or left, but here comes the kicker. We get a couple beers from the bartender, who was a super nice guy. Nothing weird about him until his question. Joining or viewing? My friend's dad cracked a smile and smacked my back and said, just viewing. The guy walks us over to another door and opens it, leading us to a much larger room. And if you haven't guessed it yet, there are about 15 people in the middle of an orgy. Pure exhibition that I was not prepared for at 12:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. F this crap, I'm out. Caught an Uber back and everything. Next story. I was at a party. It was a bunch of suburban teenagers like myself at the time. There was this dude I didn't recognize walking around and acting super hard, even though he was really scrawny. He finally got to me and was like, "Yo, I got AK-47s for sale. You want one?" And I was like, "Dude, shut up. You ain't got crap." He takes me out to his car and opens the trunk. It is full of guns, piled on top of one another. Handguns, assault rifles, shotguns, you name it. I ended up sneaking out, hopping in my car and heading home. This dude ended up being a known foot soldier type for a gang out in the nearest big city. He got arrested a few days later when he got stopped for speeding. The cops searched his car and found the guns. He was only 16. Yeah, it's one thing to be in possession of all these firearms, but to just have them in the back of your car all the time and then to be careless enough to get pulled over for speeding. Ay, what a mess. Next story. I was working a particularly awful nursing home as a CNA. I was bullied by some of the other CNAs as well as one terrible nurse. I put up with it for a year and put in my 2-week notice. I only told management, not the other staff. On my second to last day there, that nurse decided to scream in my face about some imaginary infraction. About an hour later, I learned that the company that had bought the facility earlier in the year had decided that anyone who'd been working there less than a year on the sale date would not get any vacation days. I'd also only be getting half my sick days paid out when I quit. That meant 2.5 hours of pay, and I learned that if I didn't complete my 2 weeks notice, I'd forfeit those 2.5 days. I realized 2.5 days of pay wasn't worth the abuse I was having to endure, and I told the DON at the end of the day that I was never coming back. She tried to talk me out of it, but it didn't work. So that's my F this crap, I'm out story. Next story. I was in my mid-20s, working myself to absolute death in a small-town office supply store. I mean, the amount of work I was doing as a department specialist was staggering. I was basically working and running half the store myself, so the store manager didn't have to, while the assistant manager above me was doing nothing but taking a paycheck, stealing digital cameras and lying about being a trained ninja, and staff was kept to a minimum to make store numbers look better. I was just straight up in retail hell. It's also important to note that my store manager was an arrogant, incapable a-hole 2 steps from heart failure who had been shunted to that small-town store just to get him out of the way, twice. They'd had to remove him for a while based on employee and customer complaints, some of them in the vein of sexual harassment. I don't know how he managed to keep his job. Anyway, one day he comes up to me. He's concerned about my attitude. Customers love you. You know what you're doing. You do great work. But as soon as you're not talking to a customer, your whole attitude changes. You never speak to me with respect or enthusiasm. I can see on your face that you don't want to be here. I mean, look at me. If you just improved your attitude and wanted to be here, you could be me in a couple years. Think about it. So I did. And that night, I went home, applied to go back to school, and quit my job the next day. Next story. I recently quit my job as a call center worker after 4 years. For background, I worked in customer services for a popular retailer in the UK. During lockdown, when their stores were closed, we had increased sales from online, which also means we got increased car volumes. I busted my arse off to ensure that customers were happy with their purchases and resolved any issues they had to the best I could. One day, we got an email from our CEO saying that even though we had the highest volume of online sales, we still would not be able to get a bonus due to the virus affecting the business as a whole. I only ever had a bonus once when I was working there, and I'm used to not getting a bonus. What made me pissed off was that we got absolutely nothing in return. Not a pay increase, not extra holidays, not a token of gratitude, and not even a thank you letter for all the hard work. We also found out a couple days later via the mainstream news that the bigwigs at my company all got a pay raise. At this point, myself and a few other people went, "F this crap," and we all handed our badges at reception and left. I got a new job weeks later without any problem and feel even better as a person. This was the first time ever in my life I walked out of a job in anger. Next story. I was about 17 and lived in a rural area. Used to hitchhike everywhere. One day I'm in the back of a car, two guys up front. They're talking kind of quiet. After a minute or two, I hear one say, "Okay, but this time we'll go somewhere else." Then he looks in the mirror at me. I looked away out the window, proper crapping my pants. As we went through a village, we had to stop at a junction, and I blurted something about a friend living nearby, and I opened that door and ran. Probably nothing in it, but I still get chills remembering it. Next story. I took a job in college as a camp counselor at my town summer camp. It was my first time ever working with kids. I wanted to make sure I was nice, but also still considered by them as an authority figure. I worked really hard at being accessible, fun, and responsible. We got our midsummer performance evaluations. Everything scaled on 1 to 5, 1 being bad, 5 being great. Leadership, attitude, engagement, etc., all the usual stuff. My supervisor sat me down and handed me mine. Mostly 1s, a couple 2s, told me I was going to have to be retrained and will be kept on temporarily on a probationary basis. I stood up, ripped up the evaluation, told them, "F you, I quit," and walked to my car. Man, was I embarrassed when they chased me down and told me it was a joke, and I got all 4s and 5s. Okay, so what was the resolution? Did you follow through on that quit, or did you go back to them? Curious to know the tea on that. Next story. Recently worked for a dentist who was committing all kinds of insurance fraud. Now, I'm as honest as they come, and this wasn't okay with me, especially knowing my name would be on some of the correspondence. Add to that, this guy was a complete jackass. He thought nothing of berating me in front of patients. I've been doing what I do for a lot longer than him, and that kind of disrespect I won't tolerate. I left for lunch, sent a text saying I was done, and I went home. Next story. I was a temp worker in a factory that made mayonnaise. During my break, I get a call from my mom's work. She's had 5 to 6 strokes at the same time. I went to my supervisor and told him what happened. When he replied with, "Can't you wait until your shift is over?" I took off my uniform and left the building without another word. For those who are interested, ER doctors told me my mom only survived because her coworkers reacted fast and because the clumps of blood cutting her blood flow to her brain were rather small. Next story. I was working as a network engineer, and due to mismanagement by owner who took lavish trips every 3 months with family and kids' friends. He had a payroll shortfall. His solution was to reduce my medical benefit, which included my family, to just me. Then 3 months later, reducing my salary by 30%. When he told me he also said that he expects me to work 50 to 60 hours a week until profits improve, then said, "What do you think?" I said, "I quit." I worked with him 13 years. He's called many times to get me to help with special projects for his clients, and I've politely refused. Next story. I worked as a host at a barbecue joint for 2 years and 2 months. It was my first job, so I was afraid to call off. In that 2 years and 2 months, I never called in sick once. I was late occasionally, but most of us were good about trading shifts. We'd text each other, "Hey, if you work for me Saturday, I can work for you Tuesday," stuff like that. It was nice. Made it real easy to never have to call off. Have never had that at a job since. Anyway, Friday night, my friend had a party after work and invited almost everyone we work with. I didn't work that night, and I didn't want to go because I wasn't feeling good, and we just adopted a new kitten the day before. Well, I was talked into going. My friend said, "Just stay for like an hour and then you can leave. You don't even have to drink." So me and my boyfriend go, but this party turned into what we all now refer to as the party from hell. I won't go into detail here unless someone really wants me to, but long story short, someone stole my boyfriend's keys. So we're stuck spending the night until his mom can come by in the morning and drop off a spare. I did not want to spend the night because I had to open the next morning. His mom comes by with a spare and we head home. One of my friends that was at the party calls me later to tell me she found her keys in her boyfriend's pocket. He stole them thinking it was hers, so she couldn't leave him. Again, long effing story. After that crap storm of a party and having to share a pull-out couch with my boyfriend and still being sick, I decide I'm calling off. I think I've never once called off. I know it's last minute, but what are they gonna do? No one answers because we're still closed, because like I said, I was opening. So I leave a voicemail and go to bed. Nothing like the feeling of your own bed after sleeping over somewhere. Well, I wake up a few hours later to a bunch of texts and missed calls. Turns out my managers are pissed that I called off. I call work and my friend answers, the one whose boyfriend stole our keys. And she tells me that the bosses are pissed and said I better come to work or else. I'm like, or else what? She's like, I don't know, but I've never seen them this upset. So I'm like, tell them I'm coming now. I was just going to talk to them to tell them I've never called off in 2 years and 2 months. I know I was supposed to work a double and I called off last minute, but I cannot work today. Well, when I get there, my managers aren't even working. They have the day off and the assistant manager's in charge. Turns out everyone heard about the party last night, thought I'd been drinking, and just assumed I had a hangover. Well, I set the record straight real quick and said, you know what, I quit. I'm putting in my 2 weeks notice. This is bullcrap. Give me something to sign. My AM is all like, wait a minute, don't do something you'll regret. I'm like, I've never once called off, and the first time I do, I'm told come to work or else? That's bullcrap. I'm not hungover. I was sick before I went to that party. I should have stayed home. I know, but I didn't. Ask anyone there. We spent the night because someone stole our keys. I had a bad night and it's been a bad day. I don't need this. She's going on about, I just want to make sure this isn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, which it sure as hell was, but I didn't care. She kept telling me, Fry Cook, came to work after his dad's funeral and, server, worked while she was sick. She even threw up in that trash can over there and kept waiting tables. And I'm like, that's the problem. All of that is unhealthy, not to mention unsanitary. But the owners have everyone so afraid to call off that they're literally working themselves to death. But I won't. I'm too young to ruin my life like that. I came in the next day to open again, and my manager, the owner, just looked at me and said he thought I quit. I said I put in my 2 weeks and that I could work until they hired a replacement. But he said they didn't need me anymore. Told me to leave out the front door. I qualified for unemployment because they wouldn't let me work my 2 weeks. But I never looked back, and I still don't regret it. They ended up shutting down a couple years later, didn't even give any of the employees notice. Now they're being sued for not paying their rent. Karma's a female dog. TLDR, I called off for the first time in 2 years and was told to come in or else, so I quit. They wouldn't let me work my 2 weeks. Now they're closed and being sued by their landlord. Next story. I was working as a postie. Normally, when a postie gets sick, the other posties have to cover his route. There were 7 of us, so it was annoying, but not too bad. I'd been there for a couple years and had covered other people's sick days several times. Anyway, I got sick, the sickest I'd been in my life up until that time. Had the flu, but it wound up making me look gray and shrunken, and I got a migraine. Finally went back to work. I'd had 3 days off. Piles of mail were waiting for me. I don't know if they delivered any of it. Maybe they did, but there were huge piles waiting for me. And I was still sick. I only went back in because I was worried about the workload on them. I gave my notice, finished the week, and then quit. Next story. I was working at this bakery that makes cakes and gelatos that then get sold to the grocery retailers like Fresh Market and Whole Foods to be sold in their bakery sections. This bakery was basically a reverse sweatshop where all the windows were boarded up. You worked Monday to Friday from 6 in the morning till 8 at night with 1 half-hour break. There was no music, we weren't allowed to talk, we had to be in uniform and couldn't wear jackets, it was kept at icebox temperatures so frostings wouldn't melt. It was soul-crushing. Then the woman who worked as a janitor quit. Rather than hire someone else, they put me in that role when I'd been hired as a baker. I had to clean the front office, prepare all the shipping boxes, mop every mess, clean the bathrooms. I had 2 industry degrees and over 10 years of experience in culinary at that point. To be reduced to a janitor, it was mind-numbing, tedious work. One day, I came back from my lunch break and was told that someone had made a mess in the bathroom, and I needed to stay after work to clean it. I went to the front office to talk to the woman who did most of the manage work. She was chatting with her daughter, who was a teenager who she'd hired to handle their social media, despite knowing that I had social media marketing and SEO skills on my resume. I waited and waited for about 20 minutes, just standing there so I could talk to her about this. I'd thought the janitor thing was to help them out until they hired someone new, but after a month and a half, it was clear they had no intention of hiring someone else. That was just my job now. I wanted to talk to her about how that's not what I'd been hired to do, and to see if there's a way I could go back to my original job. Her daughter glanced at me a few times, but this woman, who was facing me but never so much as acknowledged me, just kept ignoring me. So I just clocked out, got my stuff, and walked out. One of the bakery managers followed me out and said how I'd already taken my break and to get back to work. I said, "No, I'm not doing this BS anymore." She insisted I needed to tell the manager, the one who had just ignored me for 20 minutes, that I was quitting. I said I tried, and she could go F herself for treating me like I'm subhuman. Even if I didn't get the experience or the education I have, even if I was some a-hole off the street, I'm still effing human. F that lady, F that icebox sweatshop, F the owners, F the manager, F that whole place. So my Game of Thrones fans out there, this is like kind of the rage quit that the Hound, when he quit the King's Guard, like F the King's Guard, F the city, F the king. Like that's just what that reminded me of. That's hilarious. Just going out with two middle fingers in the air. Next story. Got injured on the job to the point I had to be off to recover while receiving physical therapy. Went in one day just in time to have my HR call the physical therapist and tell her they'd canceled my insurance. My physical therapist, to their credit, put the phone on speaker to let me hear what was going on. I'd been with the organization for 16 years, had pulled numerous all-nighters, sacrificed events with my family and holidays, vacation time, you name it, and put up with a ton of crap from my boss and her cronies, the grown version of the mean girls, if you will. According to them, I was often the most incompetent, lazy, terrible person there. I put up with it for way too long because I loved my clients I worked with and I believed in what we were doing. But that day was my F this crap, I'm out moment. I cussed HR out over the phone and never set foot in the place again. Not even going to pick up my last paycheck, which was all of a measly $10 I'd earned the day I went back to work part-time, only to get yelled at for not writing someone else's press release to their liking. No regrets, except I should have quit sooner. It's just not worth giving 200% when all you get back is the kind of criticism and backstabbing that makes you cry every night when you go home and cry every morning getting ready for work. Life is good now. Next story. I was at the first day of a job at a fiberglass place. I was working in a section unloading trailers. There was an incident with the forklift that resulted in a broken hand. Then I got absolutely covered in fiberglass dust. They didn't provide masks and I could feel the grit on my teeth. Everyone acted as if this was normal and even said the forklift driver was one of their safest drivers. By lunch, I said to myself, if one more thing is blatantly unsafe, I'm not coming back for a second day. Then we started putting staff away in a different section. It involved people climbing up storage racks while people were working underneath. I didn't return. Next story. My last time hanging out with my friend from high school, my husband and I were invited to her place for a barbecue. Now, my friend had a track record of being a hot mess, went down a weird, trashy life path. My husband never really liked her or her husband too much, but would go along with me out of love for me. So we get to said barbecue, and there's just a bunch of people standing around. No food in sight. My friend's husband gets home with his neighbor's grill and realizes that it's busted. No big deal, so he just leaves to find another one. Now, hungry people are getting hungrier, and my husband offers to help make some stuff on the stovetop. He does, and in the meantime, friend's husband gets back with another grill. He then starts it up and cooks the remainder of the food. And the guests actually had the nerve to female dog that the stovetop food was terrible. We left quickly after that, because my husband was about ready to explode with anger. We haven't spoken to them since. Next story. Worked at a brewery. There was some miscommunication about sugar going into a beer that was going to start brewing later that night. When I handed it off to the next brewer, that miscommunication was communicated. The right amount of sugar wound up going in, just at the wrong time. The next day, turns out the starting gravity of the wort was way off. My manager threw me under the bus to his boss and threatened my job. I took it on the chin and accepted it. I effed up, after all. Then I remembered, with a set amount of sugar, it really doesn't matter when it goes in. It's the same amount no matter what. It's going to raise the gravity the same amount, so I started looking into previous brews. Turns out, my manager handed me a totally effed up recipe. When I went to confront him about it, I found him editing the recipe sheet he handed me, and I filled out to hide the fact that he handed me the wrong recipe. Told him he owed me an apology. He refused and said that wasn't what happened. I told him to F off. He told me to go home for the weekend and we'd talk about it Monday. I told him to F off again. I was let go over the phone the next day because I was under a probationary period still. I wasn't going to come back anyways. Next story. Worked for someone who hired her lazy-ass brother-in-law as part of my team. I had to do all the work on my own, but not only did he take credit for my work, he threw me under the bus. Boss wanted to upgrade the antiquated system we were using, but the lazy ass said there was nothing wrong with our current system and blamed me for not knowing how to do it right, even though I was the one who made it work at all in the first place. Boss took his word for it and then told me I should learn how to do it properly under lazy ass's guidance. So I said F this, and I turned in my resignation letter the next day. I offered to help train whoever they were going to hire to replace me, and boss said, no need, lazy ass can handle it. Okay then. A couple of months later, I get a text message from my old boss, who has never texted me before, acting like an old friend wanting to catch up before asking me to come back. Next story. I worked in a bookstore and was about to get a monthly hour contract instead of just a call-up contract. Everything seemed to go fine. I even called up one of the higher-ups to confirm stuff was in order after some discussion about the amount of hours I should be working, until I realized I wasn't getting any wage declarations, or whatever they're called, anymore, and my paycheck seemed rather low for the amount I'd been working. Fast forward a few months later, COVID had hit, and I wasn't able to work anymore due to regulations, and I had been sending a mail every week about the paychecks, because I didn't get a response. I finally get notice that there was an accident because there was, quote, confusion over my contract. I wrote up a quick mail to the higher-ups about some questions I had regarding their policy of payment through inability to work and their lack of communication. I was expecting the boss to send me a mail, but after 2 weeks of nothing, he came by the store while I was working with customers without any indication and asked me what my problems were. Shaking and angry, I quickly listed my issues, and he dismissed all of them, saying the info was either none of my business or that it was outside of his control and could therefore not do anything. I was flabbergasted and felt isolated. My manager was willing to help, but was scared to speak up to the guy out of fear of losing her job. I decided to call up a public lawyer and help me out. A month later, I get a mail from the boss, still claiming that everything was correct and that he would pay €250 to stay hush-hush. I was fuming at this point and didn't give in. 2 weeks later, and he finally conceded in paying my wages correctly for that half year, amounting to almost €1,500. I had already written my resignation letter at this point, but boy did it feel good. Turns out they paid me for about 7 hours less per week for almost 4 months. Next story. I dated this one guy I met in college for 2 months. On Saturday night, he invites me over to meet his parents. We're having dinner talking about random things. After dinner, I'm helping his mom wash dishes. She goes to the storage closet on the other side of the house to grab another hand towel. His father comes into the kitchen and asks me, "So I guess tonight we're having a threesome." I say, "I'm sorry, what?" Mind you, I had already mentioned and explained that I was asexual, and he says, yeah, it's a tradition of BF's name, started back when he was a college freshman. Him and I have a threesome with his girlfriend. We were college seniors, 21 at the time. I said nothing, grabbed my phone, and called my friend to pick me up. Thankfully, my friend was there in 5 minutes. Never spoke to them again. Next story. Drove semi with my hubby. We had worked for our last employer for about 8 years. Best job we'd ever had. Pulled explosives, ammo, radioactive material, and haz waste. Tons of money and less miles to drive to earn it. Was even paid $16 per hour to guard load. That consisted of sitting in the driver's seat watching DVDs or listening to audiobooks. Just had to be awake and within 20 feet of the truck and 50 feet of commercial load. Then they sold the company to another company. Not bad still. Then the new company buys our biggest competitor and puts their CEO in charge. Now we're expected to ignore the laws and regs. They even tried us to pick up food-grade product in the trailer that had unstable haz waste in it. So we were going to retire out that year. I turned 62. We had a problem with the power window that quit working. Windows must work in semi for safety reasons. So we're at the end of the yard from Friday to Sunday. Go to get truck back from shop. Window not fixed due to part didn't come in. We go to our yard and dispatch gives us crap about how the load needs covered. AR to CA to KC to KS. I tell him no, truck can't get out. Dispatcher got whiny, so I walk out with hubby and ask if we can just retire now. I'm sick of his BS. He says sure. We walk back into dispatch and say we're just going to retire now. Tried that I'm tired of calling your supervisor, you'll be written up, like I give a crap. I'm effing retiring. Lots more bad stuff was happening under new CEO, and I wasn't getting arrested for big effing ticket to pay. Next story. TLDR. Suddenly realized my friend was awful. F this crap, I'm out. I had been friends with this girl for years, and as time went on, my life basically revolved around her. I had to be there to answer immediately anytime she texted or called me, walk to her house to let her borrow my things, or talk to me whenever she asked, night or day. Eventually it got to the point where she once had me walking miles to her house, then sent me back to get changed because she didn't like my outfit. I wasn't eating in front of her unless she approved of what I ate because of the comments she made. I only listened to music she liked, and I apologized to her constantly for every move I made. I won't go into too much detail for the sake of trigger warnings, but she manipulated me into doing a lot of very not nice things. She even once hit me because I forgot to bring something to her that she wanted to borrow. She also cut me off from all my other friends and put a strain on my relationship with my family. These things were all built up slowly, and as much as I like to believe I'd never let someone treat me that way, I was completely blind to it. I went to a festival with my dad one weekend, and he said I could bring a friend, so obviously her. We spent the first day together doing all the usual fun stuff, and when the time came to go to sleep, I was sharing a bed with her, we talked and then turned the light out to go to sleep. And when I turned on my side away from her, this one tear just rolled down my face, and it was like I realized everything all at once. It was crazy. I was exhausted from spending time with her, and I just realized how badly I wanted her to be as far away from me as possible. It's like it hadn't occurred to me before ever, but I was suddenly like, what the hell? I don't even enjoy spending time with her at all. Why am I here? The rest of the weekend was excruciating, and when it was over, I tried to avoid her, and when she bombarded me with horrible texts asking where the F I was, I just told her I was done saying sorry to her. She tried to tell me off for sassing her like that, and we argued over text for 3 solid days, and she went back and forth from making me feel like crap and begging me not to cut her off. When that conversation was over, it hit me how things felt free I do now, and how awful it was that I was so excited to listen to music and dress how I like and speak to whoever I want. I'm so glad I realized so I could get the hell out of that. Next story. When I was driving around with my friend and they went to buy drugs at a gas station frequented by police with a dude passed out from drugs in the back seat, I may have literally said, F this crap, I'm out, as I got out to walk home. Holy crap, I totally forgot that this night started with my friend taking me along while they went to buy drugs at a shady apartment block. The people we went to see didn't have anything, and that's where we picked up the passed out guy. Had to carry him down 3 flights of stairs. Clarified that I was not the one looking for drugs. Next story. I had been working in a group home for 4 years. The kids come and go pretty often. This time we somehow ended up with 2 girls and 3 boys. It happens, not often, but it does. Not enough homes, beds, and kids just end up places. Anyways, the 3 youth we had at the time had various anger issues. The kind where after a bad day, one kid would just punch holes in the wall. One who used their anger to control others with fear and intimidation, and the other just wanted to fight everyone else to prove he was the best. The one who wanted to be the best had the hots for a girl who rejected him, and Mr. Controlling Man was personally offended by this. There were fights, there were threats, property was damaged, coworkers were almost injured. I'd report this to my boss, who would only ever say, wait until they calm down and ask them not to do it again. There was no way that was going to work. I put in my 2 weeks. About a month and a half after I quit, I heard the home got trashed when 3 youth got into a massive fight. Old coworkers were genuinely like, OMG, you can't imagine the damage. There was like $6,000 in damage done. Who could have seen this coming? Me, from a mile away. Next story. I worked at the local hospital as a supervisor, basically ran the department while the manager attended meetings all day. The manager ended up getting a promotion and wanted me to apply for his position, so I did. I mean, hell, more pay couldn't hurt. Well, Bigwig, manager's boss, wanted his son-in-law in that position, but son-in-law's a moron and F's up his crap to the point HR won't even give him an interview. I knock my interview out of the park, and Bigwig is pissed, so he continues to drag his feet on, continuing the process and throwing additional BS in my way. End up waiting 9 months and going through 3 interviews, including one with the VP, all of them the best interviews I've ever done. Bigwig keeps wanting to wait for, quote, someone with better qualifications. Taking forever, but it's all good. No one's applying. After a while, manager starts talking to me about offers and salaries. One morning, he pulls me into his office and tells me that they reposted the position with different requirements, so I have to reapply. Needless to say, I'm livid and went straight to HR. HR brushes me off for a month and ends up bucking the complaint back down to the manager and bigwig, so I have a meeting with them to go over it. I bring my side of affairs about how I did everything they asked and how the manager's supporting me. What does manager say? Nothing. Nada. Effing zilch. The effing crickets in that room were silent from the cringe at that point. Bigwig basically says tough crap. At this point, I'm livid. I've been jumping through their bullcrap hoops, doing both my and my manager's job for years, and now my manager won't nut up and help me. The bigwig stuck around for a bit. The second he leaves, I literally drag manager into his office, chew his ass up and down, and throw my keys and badge on his desk. Didn't even clean out my crap. It's been 9 months now, and I talked to some of the guys there still. Dumbass son-in-law got the job. Bigwig got walked out by security a week or 2 after I left. Manager is still running ragged because son-in-law doesn't know his head from his ass, and my still open position needs certain qualifications that you can't find easily in our podunk town. Cherry on top, manager called me about 4 months ago begging me to come back. F this crap, I'm out. Next story. This happened back when I was in college. Me and my college buddies used to hang out a lot in the forest behind our college. It's a very remote area, so you won't find anybody out there. One day, we decided to venture deep into the forest for craps and giggles. Nobody knew where we were headed. We kept on going for an hour or so. We then stopped at a clearing to catch some breath. One of our buddies spotted footprints. The weirdest part of the footprints was that it started at one point and ended after a few meters. It's like whoever it was left this place. It didn't make any sense. At that point, everybody was like, okay, F that, let's go home. Next story. At this outdoor party with some friends, dancing and drinking, someone shoots this guy near us with a shotgun. It was so loud I went deaf for about 3 minutes. I looked down and partially saw the body about 3 feet away from me. The worst part is, the victim's friend then decides to drive through the crowd of people towards the body, meaning there's a car coming straight for me. Imagine being drunk, deaf, and blinded by the headlights of a car speeding towards you through a crowd of people after being so close to a fatal shooting. I got out of the way in time, found my friends, and we left that place so fast. No questions asked. Next story. I was working for a small business as a dog trainer. I was the only trainer I had on staff at the time. I knew how much they were charging for my services, and of course I knew how much they paid me. It was equivalent to 10% commission. I asked for a significant raise, and they dragged me around for a while, promising a raise and then something always coming up. I wanted to leave, but then didn't have many other options and was not confident enough to start my own business at the time. Fast forward a few months, and word of mouth got around about the quality of my services, and I had more people trying to register than I could feasibly fit into my schedule. So I started to schedule people months away. My boss did not like this and overrode my ability to book my own clients, overbooking me to the point where people's dogs were only getting a fraction of the training we were promising them. This went on for months, and when I went to the owner, he really didn't have much to do with the business, he just owned it. He said he would take care of it, but instead told my boss I went to him behind her back, and then she threatened to fire me. LOL, I was out of there so fast. Finally, my old boss got fired a few months after I left. Apparently, a decent chunk of the staff followed my lead and dipped once I was gone. Bye-bye, effers. Next story. This is a long story, but I worked in a nursing home kitchen one summer a couple of years ago as a kitchen porter. My job was on a temporary basis, and the home desperately required a helping hand in the kitchen, so they'd hire anybody that was looking for work. As I was desperate to pay for a summer holiday and also 2 months' rent on my student house, I accepted the job. I wasn't very good at it, but I tried my best. It was a good home, but the longer I worked there, I realized it was actually really bad. Unfortunately, the residents had no sort of privacy from carers, who would just walk into their room without knocking. I found this a serious breach of privacy and made it a point to knock on each of the doors before entering a room. One of the carers just said to me, "Just effing go in, you don't need to knock." I just ignored him and told him to do one. The residents were the saving grace of the job, and after a while I began to know them all. Some of them even requested that I come and see them if I was working that day, just so they would have somebody to talk to. When we had our breaks, I'd go and see some of the residents and learned a fascinating amount from interacting with them. One thing I also noticed was that a lot of the residents didn't even get visitors, which I must admit broke my heart a bit. I even brought it up to the care home manager that a lot of the residents were lonely and I could do a bit of volunteering in my spare time to give them company, but somehow the conversation steered back to me supposedly not wanting my job. As I didn't want to get fired, I decided to grit my teeth, but unfortunately, I began to be seen as a problem employee after that. The last straw, however, was an incident on the last day I worked there. One of my jobs was making desserts, and on that day, the nurse supervising the residents eating thought the portions of dessert I had put in the residents' bowls was too small. No problem, I just told her I'll just add some more to the plates. It'll only take a few minutes. Nurse wasn't too impressed and told me that she would get the activities coordinator, who was second in command to the care home manager, to deal with me. I thought, oh crap, as the activities coordinator had told my colleague off earlier that day. She was in a really bad mood. For context, the activities coordinator was constantly on a power trip, and she would look for any excuse to tell off an employee. But God forbid, if she was in a bad mood, it's kind of in your career kind of thing. She's the kind of person to treat people considered lower than her like scum, but anybody considered equal or higher to her in social status, and she'd lob her over them like a puppy. To this day, the activities coordinator at the care home is by far the worst person I've ever worked with. 5 minutes later, the activities coordinator found me in the kitchen, and then shouted at me right in front of the kitchen cooks and carers for a minute. That minute felt like the longest minute of my life. Then, to add insult to injury, she then said, quote, "You won't get far in your respective field after university if you're such a liability making mistakes like that." I have to be honest, I felt like shouting back. However, I didn't want to stoop to her level, so I just calmly said, okay, and just went back to the kitchen to finish my task for the day. One of the carers later told me that she felt sorry for me. I remember walking out of the home at the end of that 9-hour shift and into the car park that day, thinking I'm never effing going back to this place. When I got home, I just poured myself a beer, blasted Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven out loud on my stereo, and just burst into tears. Turned out that was my last shift anyway, as the kitchen cook, my boss, told me a few days later by text that the home had finally hired a full-time kitchen porter. He also said in the message that I wasn't suited to that job. To be honest, I had seen it coming. It was just a matter of when I would be relieved. Even then, it wasn't long before I started university again, so it was a sigh of relief. One of my colleagues left the home not long after I was let go, and he then reported the home to the CQC, Social Care Watchdog in the UK. Council inspectors come to the home and find that the kitchen is inadequate and that the meat is stored in improper places. Also, one of the stair banisters on a steep flight of stairs had come loose, which could be fatal for any of the residents. Last I heard that the care home manager got fined £50,000 and that the CQC would inspect the care home again to see what changes had been made. Next story. Left a career job after 12 years at the company I was at. One day I was sitting at my desk really deep in thought about life and such. I said to myself, is this really it? Is this all that life has to offer? I snapped out of my haze long enough to read an email from my boss about something that didn't get completed correctly by 2 of my colleagues. The email stated that it was absolutely important that I go back and resolve the issues and would need to be completed by the end of that business day. An extremely sense of calm came over me, and I just got up, walked to my boss's office and said, "Hey, you should ask nicely and not demand things from people like me." This guy's jaw hit the floor, and he just said, "Is something wrong?" I said, "Yes, everything about your leadership style is absolutely worthless to this organization, and if I were in your shoes, I would walk you out. Instead, here's my access card and such. I'm walking myself out." Never looked back on that place. My point is, don't make your life about your job. There's way better things to life than making someone else more money than yourself myself and getting talked to like a child. Next story. I was a team lead at my old job and was thrown on to a new program. One day, the manager calls me into his office and tells me I'm, quote, making too many mistakes. And when I ask exactly what kind of mistakes, he just looks at me like a deer in headlights. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm aware I did make some mistakes, but the management wouldn't tell me what exactly they based this decision on. I waited 2 weeks for an answer, and when I didn't get one, I gave them about 12 hours notice that I quit, as I thankfully had another job lined up. Yeah, I think the lack of accountability here is ringing clear and true. OP, I don't think, even though you made mistakes, you didn't do anything wrong. They at least owed you an explanation, so you're absolutely right to get out of there. Next story. Worked at a pizza place for 7 years, and the last 2, it was getting annoying. The new manager was a jerk, pathological liar, and got upset at others for leaving on time when he always left 2 to 3 hours early from openings. There were a couple of near quits, one especially on a very busy morning where I was trying to finish day prep, answer phones, and take deliveries. I get back from a double, and the boss is at the salad line trying to finish up a salad, and there are no black olives, and asks me, "Are there olives in the fridge?" I say, "Not yet, haven't gotten to them yet," and he angrily replies, "You know it's your effing job, right?" I sigh, and he adds, "Don't talk back to me." I let it slide, but the last straw was when my mother passed away. When she went into the hospital, 30 days before her death, I informed work I would be up there with her anytime they scheduled any sort of procedure. It seemed okay at first, but now comes a Saturday I'd requested off and got scheduled anyway. I was like, fine, whatever, for the week. But then on Friday, I was told my mother was going in for a serious procedure on Saturday. So I told my boss, and his reply, "You asked for the day off, so you're just using her as an excuse." I replied, "No, but you're the reason I quit." That was that. My mother passed away within a week, and I'm grateful I was with her instead of at work. Next story. I was walking down a back alley at 1 a.m. after a movie when I saw 3 people at the end just standing there, talking to each other, I guess. When I got closer, they looked at me and stood up, almost forming a blockade in the road. They were originally leaning against the walls. They just stood there watching me as I slowed down. There was still an okay distance between us. Long story short, I noped out of there fast AF. Next story. Being asked to stay past the end of working hours to staple documents for a manager. I stapled my resignation to the top. Background. The organization I was working for had months of backlogs of unpaid and untracked invoices. Within my year at the company, I reduced the backlog to 3 weeks. I also created a budget tracking system and database which could generate budget reports on the fly. Why they didn't have these with $2.6 billion of money is a wonder. By this time, my manager had proven to be quite incompetent. Examples include losing the hard copies of reports I had ready for him each morning, being unable to print emails, not knowing he had run out of office budget to pay certain contractors. I was ready to leave. As an hourly worker, I'm supposed to clock out and not look back. On this wonderful Friday, I had already clocked out and was heading to the elevator, but manager decided to press and I decided it was time to go. Next story. Went to buy weed off someone from a temporary workplace and they had a kitten and they were using as a toy for their sketchy effing pit bull and playing with butterfly knives. I smoked up with them but didn't inhale because who knows what the F was in there, and then stuffed the cat in my jacket while they were all tweaking out, snuck out and ran. I couldn't keep it because I already had 2 a-hole male cats at the time, but took it to the SPCA in the morning. It was in good health at least. The dog didn't even want to kill the cat. It was just drooling all over while they dragged it around. Next story. I was in an abusive relationship for a year. Abuse is weird. It starts out subtle and grows slowly so that by the time you're actually getting hit or whatever, other big bad things are happening, it's not a shock. You're just living in it and everything is murky and you think this is what you deserve. It's some serious brainwashing. Anyway, we got a puppy, and I'm so sorry for being a monster present. And one night, the last night, I'm just watching TV with my little 6-month-old fur baby in my lap. He comes home, he's angry that I didn't greet him sweetly enough, and he starts screaming. I get up, and I'm trying to diffuse. Instead of coming for me, as he usually does, he kicks the puppy as he yells profanities. She made the saddest noise I've ever heard. I scoop her up, throw her and myself into the hall bathroom. I lock the door, but I'm afraid it won't hold. I have my back against the door and my feet totally pressed against the bathroom cabinet opposite me, holding it shut as he bangs on the door and screams. I wasn't even crying. My mouth was just wide, and I was like, holy F, this guy just kicked a puppy. I was absolutely stunned, and that was the moment I realized with total and complete clarity that this is not normal and it is not okay. My phone was in my pocket. I pulled it out and booked a one-way flight to my parents that left later that evening. I waited for him to get bored of trying to hurt me and saunter off to some bar somewhere. When I heard him leave, I ordered an Uber. I scrambled as fast as I could to throw whatever crap of mine I could in a bag and put the pup in her crate, and I left. Never looked back. It's been 3 years. The pup and I are very happy these days. We live in a new state, in a sweet, peaceful apartment with my now girlfriend. No one ever gets hurt or does any hurting. It's really lovely. I very much love this new life of mine. Oh, and the puppy loves people. No one has been mean to her since, and the abuse didn't permanently affect her behavior. Everything and anything can heal with enough love and patience. She's the best girl. I call her my little lifesaver, even though she's not that little. She's 100 pounds, but she'll always be my little munchkin. And that's my F this crap I'm out moment. I'm so glad I'm out. Yeah, what a piece of crap, just for treating anyone that way, but then to kick the puppy, I mean, OP, you should have called the police, not a freaking Uber or booked a plane ticket, but either way, glad you got out. This guy seems like an absolute tool. Next story. I was looking for part-time work one Christmas to cover some extra bills, and a friend offered me a job at a payday loan store. I forget the name of it. He knew it was short-term. I was about 3 days into the job when the punk store manager came in and sat on the desk in front of us and gave us a lecture that we were terrible people. He bragged about how he would humiliate his staff when they made mistakes and posted their errors on the wall for all his staff and customers to see. Seeing how I didn't really need the job, I was in between contracts. I told my friend I wouldn't be in the next day. Mike hated the manager with a passion and was tired of the abuse, so he totally understood. I kind of felt bad for leaving him alone in the store. The next day, this is where I don't even feel bad for the petty revenge, but I contacted the corporate office and sent them a full detailed letter of everything that was said to us. Not only did I get a full 2 weeks salary out of it, but the punk was fired that same day, which is hilarious. He even called me at home and said, and I laughed before he hung up, "You didn't need to take it that far." I honestly didn't think he'd get fired that fast. It was pretty glorious. Next story. When I left my boyfriend of 3 years, a little backstory. He was extremely emotionally abusive. Called me a slut if I wore a form-fitting dress. Said I was ugly for wearing makeup. Couldn't do girls' night out with my friends. I was basically his property. The worst was him threatening to unalive himself if I left him. One night, he legit got out a knife and slit his throat, but not deep enough to actually go through with it. I felt stuck in the relationship. Then one day, when he called me a usual slut, it just triggered me. Something happened where I just couldn't take it anymore and said, F this crap, I'm out. And that was the best decision I've ever made. Next story. 17. High school sweetheart started snorting heroin. Cheated on me after snorting heroin. Friends close to us started showing up to school in long sleeves. In Florida in the spring. I'd done drugs. I wasn't innocent, but it started to get scary. Fast forward 15 years. My long-sleeve friends are all dead. My high school sweetheart killed and dismembered his brother and stuffed him in an oil barrel and then unalived himself. I got out when I was 17 because I recognized the situation I was in. Stay and die soon or go and die after a fulfilling life. I chose correctly. Next story. I was around 14 and I'd gotten my first phone. My siblings and I had gone to a restaurant, and when we came back home around 12 a.m., while trying to unlock the door of the house, we heard screams coming from inside the house. We went inside and found my crazy aunt beating the crap out of my 8-year-old cousin while my other cousins were crying, trying to get her to stop. My aunt is a strong woman, so that was really difficult. Eventually, I took the metal bat from my backyard and I hit her in the back of the head and knocked her out. My siblings both stared at me, but I just called my dad to pick me up and took my 8-year-old cousin with me. I'd figured that my other 2 cousins would call 911 and then call their own father to pick them up. I guess not, since I was allowed the next day to pack some of my cousins and own things. We stayed with my dad for about 2 months. Turns out my aunt was mad because he had gotten nail polish on her new shoes.